r/ask Reddit. People who have quit their jobs on the spot. What was the moment when you finally snapped? When I was in college, I waited tables at a restaurant that was open on Thanksgiving. After I had already worked the lunch shift, covering for someone who took off for the holiday, I was ready to finish my shift and head out so I could have Thanksgiving dinner with my family when my manager informed me that they were going to need me to cover dinner shift too because one of the older waitresses called out, probably to spend Thanksgiving with her family. When I told him I had plans already, he said I needed to cover the shift since I had the least seniority and they wouldn't need someone who isn't a team player, implying I'd be fired if I didn't cover it. I told him I don't need this job that much to miss Thanksgiving dinner with my family and handed in my apron and left and never returned. Oh my god, I don't even know you, but I'm so proud of you. I worked for a local Target in electronics. A store manager who was not my direct manager called me at my father's funeral to ask where I was and why I wasn't at the electronics boat cash register. Days earlier I had told my manager that I wouldn't be there because I had to attend my father's funeral. Was told it was okay. But this other manager just wasn't having it and explained to me that she was in the store the same day her child was born. I have never worked for a more ignorant and inept manager. Yep, how's it your problem? She was working the day her child was born. My mom was working the day that the oldest child was born. Just not at the same time. I was working in a ski shop at a local ski resort. They used a shuttle to ferry us up and down the canyon since most employees lived in a town nearby. They asked me if I was taking the shuttle and said yes, but that I needed to put away the cash drawer real quick. When I finished and went down to meet them, they were gone. I was stuck on the mountain, without a vehicle, in -17-degree weather. Luckily my family had a cabin about 10 miles away to which I had a key, but I emailed my resignation on my walk to the cabin. What the hell did they expect you to do? Just die up there? They assumed I drove my own car despite me explicitly saying I didn't. I had a boss that would schedule me 6 days a week, all split shifts, which would generally be 10-3, then 5-10. Which pretty much took up all my time. One day she was on my ass about how I don't seem motivated to be here, that I'm lazy and to come back after my split with a better attitude. I told her I'm not coming back and she can duck off. My work kinda does the same. I either work the morning or morning and night, so it doesn't feel like I have time to do anything. The only night off I get is the day we're closed, because all the other cooks took days off when I never do. I threw a couple requests in well in advance, and if I don't get them, I'm walking. It was just when I was in high school working at McDonald's. Before they would give you a raise you had to do all this bullshit. Train people, watch videos, take quizzes. Really easy but annoying and tedious. I did all of this. Didn't get a raise. I asked every store manager and they said that it would show up on my next check. Eventually I called the regional manager who had put his phone up in the break room. But he answered "Don't call this number" and hung up on me. So I told my boss I quit and just walked out. On a Monday morning, after my and my team's paycheck had been 2 weeks late, for like a 100th time, I asked the boss if he had wired the money at all, as he had a habit of lying that he did, only to wire it days later. To which he responded with "We don't start a ducking work week with such questions. We started with ducking reports from the week before. Duck him." I literally just quit, so I worked at my company for 3 years and was asking for more responsibility and a raise. Was told there was no room in the budget. Alright, not a problem. The new kid that joined just a few months prior got a sign-on bonus, commission bonus and raise within 2-3 months. This kid loved to talk about everything. I told my boss I wanted to put in my 2 weeks and he just stared at me. I asked if he wanted to know why and he said "I'm not having this conversation while you're being emotional." I laughed at him, walked inside and said my goodbyes and left on the spot. Now I'm enjoying my summer. Edit. I'm not a female. My boss just sat behind a computer most of his life and never learned people skills or how to handle confrontations. So he goes for a sarcastic response when in a corner. I always discuss my pay with my coworkers. Even the best employers would prefer if you didn't because they are banking on a certain percentage of people not wanting to rock the boat asking for more compensation. saving then tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars per year. If you're not willing to discuss your pay rate with your contemporaries at work, you'll never know where you stand comparatively, and it makes it difficult to formulate an argument about your value. I've told this story before. I had just started working at a secure psychiatric facility for emotionally disturbed children at the start of the summer, end of May. At the interview I told the HR person that I had a pre-planned trip home for later in the summer and that since I was driving I was going to be away for 2 weeks. I hadn't been home to see my family for 2 years. I made it clear to her that if this was going to be a problem to let me know right then and I would seek employment elsewhere. She reassured me it wouldn't be a problem and that she would leave a note in my file saying as much. So the time for my trip nears. I give them the 2 weeks notice as agreed upon at the interview, but my immediate supervisor refuses to approve the time off. Figuring it was a miscommunication, I tell the immediate super about the interview agreement with HR, that the issue was already settled at the initial interview. So she gives me this runaround and asks me to give her a couple of days to come up with a solution. Next day she calls me into her office and has the balls to say, okay, I know how we can work this. You can work a double shift on Sat, 18 hours mind you, then leave for home right after and make your drive. 30 hours non-stop. Visit your family for 3 days then drive back. 30 hours non-stop. And arrive in time to work another double. I couldn't stop myself. I laughed uncontrollably. I asked her if she was seriously suggesting I stay awake for 48 hours straight. 30 of those spent on highways crossing the country. She just gave me this stupid smile and said, yes, you can do it. You have a responsibility to the center. I laughed in her face and told her I wouldn't work for such a cesspool. A place that would dare suggest I put my personal safety in harm's way and wouldn't honor an agreement made. I quit in the spot. I was still scheduled for the rest of that week. They had the nerve to call me at home that night asking if I was coming in. I told the person who called no way in hell and I told him what happened. Then the super called me and basically said I had to come in. I was scheduled. I suggested she could cover my shift. I mean, she already worked 9 hours. What was another 18? She could do it. I left for my trip the next day. So, this shit right here makes me angry AF because that is how my dad died. He worked for a government company that wanted him in a town 9 hours away at 8 AM, but he had to stay in our town until 5 PM for a meeting. They refused to fire him. Instead of quitting, my dad agreed. He took off at 5 and he never made it. He fell asleep and went off the side of the mountain. It was 2 weeks before Christmas. 20 years later and I am still angry about it. And I still refuse to budge about driving tired. There is no job worth losing your life. And no amount of money can replace a family member. I worked at a grocery store as a bagger and they asked me to clean a destroyed bathroom. I mean, shit everywhere. All over the toilet, the walls, the ducting ceiling. Anyways, I said this is not worth my minimum wage and left. Worst part is my friend got me the job there and they saved it for him to clean the next day. He quit on the spot also. They saved it? Isn't that a health code violation? It is a health code violation. That store is in the wrong completely. I quit on the spot from a Verizon call center, but not for the reason you would think. I had a call where a guy wanted a cheaper plan and wanted it now. I did some number crunching so I could tell the guy exactly what his weird partial plan bill would look like, since he was changing his plan in the middle of his billing cycle and things will look weird on the next bill. I do the math and change the plan and the guy was super happy. I feel good about being able to solve his issue. Fast forward, I get a failed survey from the guy. Now in my call center that means your pay gets docked. I listen to his recorded feedback and he is freaking out because he's angry he got a survey that had nothing to do with me or how I helped him, so I sent it to QA asking them to overturn it so my pay doesn't get affected. They listened to the call and said my fail was valid because I had one part in my call where I was quiet for 30 seconds while doing math. I couldn't talk and crunch all the numbers. That was my last straw among a lot of other shit, so I rage quit. They asked if I wanted to finish my day first. I gave them my badge and left. Duck Verizon. Too long, didn't read. Got a failed survey in a call center for a customer complaining about getting a survey and they said my fail was valid, so I quit. I shudder when I think of all the people that have worked for a Lorica Verizon call centers. I was a team manager and saw people quit fire nearly on a daily basis. I'm a nanny. The mom I was working for was an absolute nutcase. I loved all 4 children and they loved me dearly. I spent 50 hours a week at their house, on top of taking care of all 4 and making sure they were all at their 500,000 extracurricular activities and constantly entertained. She insisted her giant home be cleaned by me and all 6 people's laundry be done every single day. She liked the bins to be completely empty. I kept up with it. After a while she got more and more demanding, even leaving her dishes out after breakfast for me to clean. I talked to them about how my only responsibility should be the kids. They agreed. A couple weeks later she went back to her old self and was texting me after work no more than 10 minutes after I'd get out the door about dust and other petty things. I told her she needed to stop and reminded her about the conversation we had. She blew up and said if I didn't do better they'd have to find someone else. I drove straight to her house and dropped her car seats off out front. I never went back and I blocked her number. I miss the kids and hate that I couldn't say bye, but I don't regret it at all. The same thing happened to me when I was an au pair in Germany. I was expected to do all laundry, dishes, vacuuming, and ironing, as well as watch the kids, take them to all extracurriculars, and teach them English. When I said I was going way over the hours recommended by my visa, the mom said she would ease up on me, but then she went back to writing these insane lists of stuff for me to do. They went on vacation, and I sent them an email that I quit. The dad even had the gall to threaten me via email back by implying that due to his law career, if I ever had legal trouble, he would make things more difficult for me. I switched to a much more sane family who wanted me to actually watch their kids as a primary job role. Imagine that. I never understand people who are rude to the help. Holy cats, if I could afford someone to do household chores like cooking and cleaning, I would probably follow them around all day in tears of gratitude. OMG, you did my laundry and cooked enchiladas? What heaven did you descend from, my angel? I was working as a software developer for a company that, shall we say, didn't understand the value of its IT team. I could go on and on about the shit we had to put up with there. One day my direct boss, the only person in senior management who could tell his ball sack from a computer, who had personally hired all of us, and was our shield against the shit show of the rest of the company, told our team he was leaving. So we all were on edge. I had been promised a sizable performance bonus in lieu of a raise, because the CEO was a cheap piece of shit and I was planning on quitting anyway, so I figured whatever. When my performance review came up, I wrote up a spreadsheet detailing how I had fulfilled every aspect of my bonus requirements, and I emailed it to my new supervisor. I didn't get a response, so I went into his office Friday morning and asked about it. He said that before they could give me the bonus, I had to provide detailed documentation and training on all the code and work I'd done for the past year, because they couldn't guarantee I wouldn't just walk out the second I got my money. I told him they could either pay me the money they owed me for the work I'd done to date, which was the agreement, and I would do everything in my power to make sure they could continue if and when I left, or I could walk out at that moment and leave them with nothing. And I did exactly that. The entire dev team quit over the next 6 months. I wouldn't be surprised if he was planning on firing you once you'd finished the training in lieu of paying the bonus. Exactly. Once they had my documentation, I was expendable. If they were petty enough to screw me over a few $1,000s when I had some leverage, I knew they would screw me completely the moment I gave it up. Telemarketing. The job sucked, but I needed the cash and knew that going in. My first day after training, I overheard 2 supervisors talking about the product I was selling. It was basically travel insurance. Lame, but okay. But the guy says we only call people with poor credit because we know most of them won't look into it once it shows up on their card. I just couldn't bring myself to scam people, no matter how much I needed the cash. You are a good human being that is worth more than money to some people. Pallet of packs of bottled water toppled over, pinning me against a wall. Managed to get my radio and ask from someone to come out the back and help me immediately. 15 minutes later I get assistance. Not from the staff, mind you. Someone coming in to start their shift. Hauling pallets is meant to be a 2-person job, but in the 4 years I was on delivery it was almost always just me. Oh, and I only got put on delivery because the guy who was doing it before popped the end of his little finger off when a poorly stacked pallet caught his hand between a door and the stock. It's OSHA time. The paychecks kept bouncing. I'm not talking oh, shit, sorry, here's your money type of thing. It was a small business. So the first time I just figured he forgot to make a deposit into the payroll account. He kept blaming the bank. Eventually just told me to take it out of the register. The other 2 employees didn't get paid. Next check. The next guy was able to take money out of the register. But myself and the third guy couldn't because the money just wasn't in the register. The store needed to pull in 10k mo to be profitable, and we barely pulled in 2k. He didn't advertise, didn't get us parts, we were a cell phone repair store in a Walmart, and wouldn't let us do what needed to be done to grow the store. Eventually the manager had it and just walked out, so I got stuck watching the store while the owner worked out the payroll issues. My GF at the time lived in Nashville and I lived in NC. She was pregnant and got into some sort of accident, so I booked a trip out there. When I returned to NC, I didn't even bother answering their calls. Never got a final check. They deleted my hours from the payroll system, and I had proof of this, and reported them. The state sided with them because I couldn't prove I actually worked those hours. My first job was a telemarketer as a senior high school student. I should have known it was super shady by our script showing lots of locations crossed out from where they were located previously and the office looking like it could be packed up at any moment. Even the script had canned responses to questions like how much money is it in total? And we were supposed to answer I'm not really sure. I'm not very good at math. Anyways, everything was confirmed when I became friends with one of the most tenured telemarketers there. And he said they basically get your credit card and charge a whole bunch of money on it, which is the lump sum plus all these hidden fees charges. I quit at the end of the day. Nothing serious. I was hired at a company and was promised $13.50 an hour. Well, first check came and it was for 13. Told my supervisor. Second and third check came and nothing changed. Went to my manager both times. We got paid every fortnight. When I got my 5th check and I saw nothing had changed, I just quit on the spot. Report them to the Department of Labor. They take wage theft extremely seriously. The last check I got from that company after I quit was for $13.50 an hour and I got retro paid for all the hours since I started working there. I just left it at that. Currently working somewhere way better. When I was 17 I worked in a sports shoe store in a mall. I had this manager that would constantly require that we upsell more items to customers and would yell at us if we did not attempt to do so. I had worked there for a few months and had been relatively happy, but this manager was always on our case to upsell more and more items as it made the store look good to other stores in our franchise. One afternoon a boy in his late teens, wearing tattered, old, dingy clothes with mismatched shoes that were falling apart walked in, very aware that people were looking at him and judging due to his appearance. I greeted him and asked what I could do for him. Timidly, he told me he had a job interview coming up and needed a new pair of tennis shoes. I showed him a couple of options but he shot them down quickly. I could see we were way out of his price range, but somehow he was brave enough to ask if we had anything in the $20 range. This was a place that normally sold Jordans and other $100 plus shoes. I knew we had a couple pairs in the back that had been put away after a clearance sale and were supposed to be shipped back to corporate. I grabbed a few pairs in his size and found a pair that worked for him quickly after. As we head to the register to ring him up, he still has this look on his face that I won't forget. He pulls out a sandwich baggie of $1 bills and a bunch of coin change. Now I know it is probably embarrassing for his guide to come into a shopping mall with this on his to-do list, so I help count everything behind the counter only to find he is about 40 cents short. I grabbed some change I had in my pocket and told him not to worry about it. He smiles, thanks me for the help and walks out. My manager came over instantly after and starts to berate me in the front of customers and co-workers about not following store policy and trying to upsell to each and every customer. She watched the whole sale unfold and just couldn't grasp why I would even attempt to sell more thing to this guy. I grabbed my things from the back and walked out, only to go back a week later to pick up my last check. I didn't make a scene or anything cool. Just walked out. Duck that manager and that place. Good for you, man. You made the world a better place for that kid. Worked at a petland in high school. They didn't take very good care of the animals. A vet visited once a week, but if anything happened in the meantime there was no taking them anywhere. I only worked there about a month. I opened with the manager one day and 2 lovebirds had gotten in a fight overnight. One lost a foot. My manager took it to the back, put it in a small cage and put a towel over it. I kept asking when the vet was coming and my manager kept brushing it off. By midday it was apparent they were just going to let it die. Out of sight, out of mind. They finally said the vet would be in 3 days like it was no big deal. I cried, ran out and never went back. I've told everyone I've known since then how awful they are. In hindsight I wish I would have done more. But teen me didn't have the backbone I do now. Pet stores are awful places, and petlands are the worst of them all. I've never seen a pet store in my life that actually gives you proper and correct care advice for the animal they're selling you. It's always the minimum possible care to not look bad or be called out on animal abuse. I am a cook and it was 2 stages. The first stage was my boss moved me from nice weekday prep shifts to busy weekend night closing shifts without asking me or even discussing it with me. She just posted the schedule. This was because the night cook quit due to the crazy workload of night shifts. Second stage was a busy Saturday night when all hell just broke loose. Had order tickets puking out of the machine with no end in sight. About 3 hours in, I remember going into the walk-in freezer, closing my eyes while breathing deep and hard in a panic. I was just trying to calm myself. I think it was the first time in my life I actually had a panic attack, or close to it. Finished the night, cleaned the kitchen up, and went home. Wrote out my 2-week notice and gave it to my boss the next day. No job is worth that level of stress. We should have had 2-3 cooks in that kitchen for how busy it was on the weekends. Not one. Wait, you guys had 1 cook on a weekend in a shift? Our small restaurant has 4. Yep. I mean it was in a bowling alley roller skating rink, so no real tables except in the bar. But when all 20 lanes are ordering food for 6 people apiece and you have 30-40 orders every hour coming in from the skate side, it's just as busy as a regular sit-down restaurant on the weekends. I worked at a deli that also did sandwich platters for catering. The boss sucked at ever being prepared for these orders, so we always had to work super hard from first thing in the morning to get them filled on time while also preparing for walk-in customers' lunches. The one day the owner came out and I excitedly told him about how quickly we had finished the catering and how it was ready to be delivered. In response to this I got quite the yelling at for having not remembered to turn on all the lights in the cabinet. He was a terrible boss in general, but this was the final straw. I tried to stick up for myself and explain that it was okay and I would turn it on then, but this was not appropriate behavior. He got right up in my face and told me I had to respect for authority and that I didn't deserve any job, and that if I continued to talk to him that way he would call all of his contacts and see to it that I would never work again. Unfortunately I have no guts, so I waited until he left to go back to his office, covered a co-worker's break, and then walked out. But still, I think it counts. I was hired as a janitor at a movie theater when I was a teenager. I found out that everyone who was hired the week before me were being paid $1 more an hour. I was getting glowing reviews because I was actually doing my job and working hard, rather than slacking off like most every one of those other kids. So I asked the manager if I could get a raise to get paid evenly with them. I was told tough luck. It was the end of my shift, and I never came back. I was scheduled for full time the next week, but I didn't answer my phone when they called asking where I was, and left for a road trip with a buddy instead. Worked in chain restaurant as a server. Management policy was to cut anyone about to hit overtime to secure their MGMTS quarterly bonus. We were the anomaly of this particular chain, near a lot of tourist attractions and always busy, especially on the final day of the pay week, but management didn't care. Cut kitchen, cut expediters, cut hosts, cut servers. We'd have a 45 hours false wait with have the restaurant empty. This would force management to try to cook, expedite, serve, etc. Of course not very well, lol. A few weeks went by where I would pretty much kindly tell people in the waiting area to try other places in the area when they asked for a manager to complain. I would literally tell them the manager was the only cook and they couldn't speak to them. Actually had a few tables wait and sit in my section cause they said they appreciated the honesty of someone telling them why the waits were long. Eventually I'm scheduled a double on last day of pay week and we are slammed. making good money, so I decide to pretty much forego my break between shifts and do fix side work that someone from day shift did half-assed. So skipping my meal and cleaning someone else's mess. A manager cuts people in kitchen, then comes to me and say this station looked like shit all day. I knew it was you assigned to it. I wasn't. I looked him in the eye, dropped what I was working on and walked into the office. Told the manager I was done, and he saw the look on my face even though he knew I was scheduled for a double. He just said the other manager's name to me and I said yes, and the look he gave told me he hated the other MGR more than anyone. LOL. No regrets. Got a much better job and started a new career a month later. I worked my way from cook to assistant manager at a booming restaurant. My shift started doing amazing numbers from our internal metrics by a large margin and getting the big boss's attention. Store managers start scheduling very little to no crew members for my shifts. Had no cooks on Friday, Saturday nights, so I'd have to do all the cooking and manage the front of the house. Store manager then promotes a freeloading nephew Steve, who most of the staff hated. He had a constant huge discolored gross STD sore on his lips which disgusted a lot of the customers who'd come in for a meal. One day it was just her nephew and I for like the first 2 hours of my shift. Her nephew just walked around aimlessly with a clipboard and wouldn't help at all when I asked. Took off my apron, threw it on a counter, got in my car and just drove away. I read reviews recently and it dropped from a 4+ star rating to below 2 stars with numerous complaints of how trashy, slow, racist, and rundown the place has turned into. I was working at a call center where we did home retention. No papers or pens were allowed on your desk. Understandable BC, you can't steal ACC numbers. I was sick and blowing my nose when I got written up for having a tissue at my desk. A whole lot had been leading up to that moment, but I yelled I quit, with my hands above my head, and proudly walked out of that place and never looked back. I don't recommend burning bridges, but I never saw any repercussions. I got in my car and yelled at my steering wheel all the way home how I was always reprimanded for anything. Rules would change every other week. I would do as instructed. Next week it was wrong, or sometimes next day it was wrong. The final straw was I was told I was to remain in my area no matter what, then called into the office and dressed down heavily for not going to help out a coworker. Even the coworker looked at me like I am so sorry. I was one of the only males working at the location. I think the manager wanted me gone. I eventually took the hint. Despite never being formally written up, reprimanded, losing hours. Somehow, despite how wrong I did things, I always had a full schedule. Was unloading trucks at Walmart and this crackhead manager comes in saying, "Man, you're going slow, I'll do it faster than you." Mind you, she's 5 feet to 100 pounds wet. I tell her okay, you do it, then I don't get paid enough for this, and walked out. Reason I call her a crackhead is because it was found out months after she was stealing money from the registers and buying crack from another employee. Reason I call her a crackhead is cause she was a crackhead. Worked at Staples for 2 weeks when I first moved to NC. I got called into the manager's office one afternoon and the manager accused me of a bunch of shit I didn't ducking do. You don't go up to the registers fast enough. Someone said you don't have a team first attitude, etc. Like in my face berating me type shit. Completely caught me off guard cause I thought I was doing a decent job. Never gave me a chance to defend myself. He pulls out a stack of applications and says, "Cause I have a whole stack of people waiting to apply here. Why should I focus on keeping you?" I laughed, didn't say a ducking word, and walked out of that place forever. Never looked back. I had the night off from my restaurant job and decided to go out for drinks. My co-worker and I had a similar taste in music and a song we were both obsessed with came on, so I tagged her in my Facebook status. Unbeknownst to me, said co-worker called in sick, with doctor's note, for her shift that same night, and the staff were pissed because they thought she was out with me. General manager clears me from the schedule and says I have to meet with him over all this. I ask him why I'm being punished for something when I had the day off and did nothing wrong. To which he says that he's going to see what HR recommended to fire me. I said, "I'll save you the call." I quit and walked out then and there. Showed up the next day for lunch with my grandma. She knew what happened. Out of sheer pettiness and that beach gave me my employee discount and hurried into the back of the house to hide from me. Don't try to duck with me and think I'm not gonna be petty f. Mind you, same manager would be gone for hours getting light bulbs. Dude got fired within 6 months. Whoa, you made it to the end? You're a ducking beast. I'll cut you a deal. Smash like and subscribe for more curated content, bruh. It's free and that's a great price.